Okay, the reading for this week is selections from the Confucian Analects again, the Lunyu. Whereas last time we talked about Ren, the passages that had to deal with Ren, or humaneness or benevolence. Now we're talking about the passages that have to do with Confucius as teacher and person. So once again, these what do you call them? These kyozai handouts. I couldn't think of the word for kyozai. These handouts were compiled at Columbia University by somebody at Columbia University and put on the internet. I'll provide the link to the PDFs below, and we'll be using them for this class. Because it would take too much time to read the entire works of all these classics from Chinese history and culture and literature and so forth. All right, Confucius, just to review, Kongzi Confucius born in 551 BC, died in 479 BC. He lived during the time when the Zhou kingdom had disintegrated into many de facto independent feudal states, which were subject to the Zhou kings only in theory. So remember, the Zhou dynasty, the Zhou period lasts very long. This is toward the latter part of it, as things were disintegrating, and Confucius looked back at the early days of the Zhou and saw them as sort of a model for what should be of a kind of world that should be re-implemented. Confucius was a man of the small feudal state of Lu. Like many other men of the educated elite class, or the Shi class of the Eastern Zhou, Confucius traveled among the states, offered his services as a political advisor and official to feudal rulers, and taking on students whom he would teach for a fee. He had an unsuccessful career as a petty bureaucrat, like Mencius, who succeeded him, who came 100 years later, I think, but a highly successful one as a philosopher and a teacher. A couple of generations after his death, first and second generation students gathered accounts of Confucius's teachings together. These anecdotes and records of short conversations go under the English title of the Analects. In Chinese, it's the Lunyu. Japanese say Longo. Same kanji, they pronounce it differently, Longo. The selections below illustrate Confucius as a teacher and as a person. So once again, these selections are taken from William Theodore de Barry's book, Sources of Chinese Tradition, Volume 1, published by Columbia University Press, 1999. As always, there's the abridged short version, and then the longer version. I will read from the longer version of the excerpts. All right, but we'll start with the questions that we will consider in class and answer together in discussions. Question number 1. What qualities of Confucius do you think might have made him a good teacher? Do you think he would still be considered a good teacher if he were alive today in our own society? Why or why not? What qualities do you think Confucius would look for in an educated person? Was Confucius an egalitarian or an elitist? This is an important question. Was he an egalitarian or elitist? Obviously, with his theory of the Junzi, or the superior man of virtue, you might argue that he is an elitist, but there are other aspects of his thought that are very egalitarian. We'll discuss those in class. What is Confucius's attitude toward life and toward himself? Right? Some of these questions are pretty bland and simplistic and sort of directed at high school students, I think. So I will probably make study guides to go over these texts in a little more depth, and we'll discuss those in class as well. All right, here are the selections from the Lunyu that have to do with his ideas on Confucius as a teacher and as a person. And book 2:4 is read, at least for now in these videos. I will read them as book 2, chapter 4. The master said, "At 15," this is a very famous passage, underline it. "At 15, my heart was set upon learning." Da shui de shui, right? Shui, learning. At 30, I had become established. At 40, I was no longer perplexed. At 50, I knew what is ordained by heaven. This is the mandate of heaven he's referring to, the Ming. At 60, I obeyed. At 70, I could follow my heart's desire without transgressing the line. Book 2, chapter 15, the master said, "To learn without thinking is unavailing. To think without learning is dangerous." This is a very important passage that is quoted in later centuries by many Confucianists and Neo-Confucianists. Underline it, remember it. To learn without thinking is unavailing. To think without learning is dangerous. So the implication, of course, is that learning and thinking must take place simultaneously together in tandem. Book 2, Chapter 17, the master said, "You, shall I teach you what knowledge is?" And the you he's referring to is Zhou, rather, not you. Zhou, also known as Zhou, was especially known for his impetuousness. So he says, the master said, Zhou, shall I teach you what knowledge is? When you know something, to know that you know it. When you do not know, to know that you do not know it. This is knowledge. Book 4, Chapter 15, the master said, Shun. In my way, Dao, in my Dao, there is one thing that runs throughout. Zheng Ze said, yes. When the master had gone out, the disciples asked, what did he mean? Zheng Ze said, the master's Dao is loyalty and reciprocity. That is all. Okay, so loyalty, a key word, one of the cardinal Confucian virtues. Zhong in Chinese, Chu in Japanese, Naka with the kokoro ben underneath it. And reciprocity is Shu. We'll go over these kanji in class. Shu is a kind of difficult kanji that looks like okoro, to be angry. Book 4, Chapter 16, the master said, the noble person, so underline the noble person, whenever you see it, it means it's referring to the junzi, the kun shi, junzi, the noble person, the exemplary person, the superior man, the Übermensch kind of, if you want to borrow Nietzsche's terms. The master said, the noble person, the junzi, is concerned with righteousness. Righteousness, underline this is yi, gi in Japanese, one of the cardinal Confucian virtues, righteousness. The noble person, the junzi, is concerned with yi, righteousness. The small person, or the shaoran, is concerned with profit. All right, the small person is the antithesis of the noble person, of the junzi. So these are often contrasted in Confucius's writings. So the noble person is concerned with yi. The small person or petty person is concerned with profit. Book 5, Chapter 11, Zigong said, what I do not want others to do to me, I also want to refrain from doing to others. The master said, this is not something to which you have attained. So this is again a reference to the Golden Rule. Confucianism, or Ru Jiao, is the Chinese word for Confucianism. Ru, Jukyo in Japanese, is often referred to as a Golden Rule religion because it stresses the Golden Rule, and there are many passages that refer to the Golden Rule, including this one here. Book 7, Chapter 1, the master said, I transmit but do not create. In believing in and loving the ancients, I dare to compare myself with our old Pang. And our old Tang, there's a footnote here about that. This is the identity is unclear, but he is usually taken to be the Chinese counterpart to Methuselah. All right, we'll look into that later. But the important part here is that Confucius did not conceive himself as somebody who's coming up with a new philosophy, a new way of doing things. He said he's simply returning to the old ways of the old sages and the wise kings of the early part of the Zhou dynasty, right? So the loving the ancients, gu is the word for the old or the ancients. And in believing in and loving the ancients, I dare to compare myself with the old Pang. All right, he transmits but does not create is the important part there. Book 7, Chapter 7. The master said, from one who brought only a bundle of dried meat on up, I have never declined to give instructions to anyone. And there's a footnote here about the dried meat or other food was offered as a present for teachers. Here it suggests the least one might offer. All right. Moving on. Where are we? Book 7, Chapter 8. The master said, to one who is not eager, I do not reveal anything, nor do I explain anything to one who is not communicative. If I raise one corner for someone and he cannot come back with the other three, I do not go on. Okay, I'm not going to comment on all of these because it'll take too long. Moving on, Book 7, Chapter 15, the Master said, having coarse rice to eat, water to drink, a bent arm for a pillow, joy lies in the midst of all this as well. Wealth and honor that are not rightfully gained are to me as floating clouds. Floating clouds, ukigumo in Japanese, image that appears a lot in Chinese poetry and makes its way into Japan as a sort of important symbol or metaphor. So we'll discuss more about that in class. Moving on, Book 7, Chapter 18, the Duke of Shi asked Zilu about Confucius, and Zilu did not answer him. The master said, why did you not simply say, this is the sort of person he is, so stirred with devotion that he forgets to eat, so full of joy that he forgets to grieve? Joy is le, kanji for naku, tanoshi, le. So full of joy that he forgets to grieve, unconscious even of the approach of old age. So it's Confucius kind of showing his humorous side and describing himself. Book 7, Chapter 21, the Master said, walking along with three people, my teacher is sure to be among them. I choose what is good in them and follow it, and what is not good and change it. Book 7, Chapter 24, there were four things that the Master taught. Culture, Weng, conduct, Xing, I think, loyalty, Zhong, and trustworthiness. Also Xing, with different kanji. Book 7, Chapter 37, the Master was wild and yet strict, dignified and yet not severe, courteous and yet at ease. Book 9, Chapter 4, four things the Master eschewed. He had no preconceptions, no prejudices, no obduracy, and no egotism. So these four things are anathema to Confucius's thought. Book 9, Chapter 10, Yang Yuan, sighing deeply, said, I look up to it, and it is higher still. I delve into it, and it is harder yet. I look for it in front, and suddenly it is behind. The Master skillfully leads a person step by step. He has broadened me with Weng, culture, and restrained me with Li, ritual. When I wish to give it up, I cannot do so. Having exerted all my ability, it is as if there were something standing up right before me. And though I want to follow it, there is no way to do so. Book 15, Chapter 28, the Master said, a human being can enlarge the way, the Tao, but the way, the Tao, cannot enlarge a human being. All right, this is a very profound statement he's making here. We'll discuss what it means in class. Book 15, Chapter 38, the Master said, in education there should be no class distinctions. So here we're seeing the egalitarian side of Confucius, right? He's not arguing for strict hierarchy, for a certain kind of education for the lower classes and a certain kind of education for the upper classes and so forth, as he's often characterized as being a strict hierarchist, if that's a word. But instead he's saying, in education there should be no class distinction. Everyone should learn the same thing. So he's advocating for a kind of universality here among all the social classes. Book 17, Chapter 2, the Master said, by nature close together, through practice set apart. And as the note here explains, here he is referring to the simple observation attributed to Confucius was agreed upon as the essential truth with regard to human nature and racial difference by a group of international. Okay. All right. So basically he's saying that all humans are by nature close together. However, our practices, the different practices and customs and conventions of the different tribes and peoples of the earth makes them different, right? But by nature they are all identical. So again, this emphasis on universalism, universality among humanity. Ren. Book 18, Chapter 6 is fairly long. I'll read it now. Chengju and Jieni were working together tilling the fields. Confucius passed by them and sent Zilu to inquire about the ford. Changju said, "Who is it who is holding the reins in the carriage?" Zilu said, "It is Kongqiu." Kongqiu, of course, is Kongzi, Confucius. "Would that be Kongqiu of Lu?" Would that be Confucius? It would. In that case, he already knows where the ford is. Zilu then inquired of Jieni. Jieni said, "Who are you, sir?" Zhongyu. "The follower of Kongqiu of Lu?" "Yes. A rushing torrent, such is the world. And who can change it? Rather than follow a scholar who withdraws from particular men, would it not be better to follow one who withdraws from the world?" He went on covering seed without stopping. Okay, one who withdraws from the world, he might be referring to the Taoists here, but we'll look into that later. Continuing, Zilu went and told the master, Confucius, who sighed and said, "I cannot herd together with the birds and beasts. If I do not walk together with other human beings, with whom shall I associate? If the way prevailed in the world, I, Chu, Zhongqiu, Kongqiu, I would not be trying to change it." Okay. So I think here he's stressing that he is not a Taoist. That unlike the Taoists, he does not leave humanity and go into the woods and pursue his own Tao, but says rather that Tao, because it does not exist in the world, in society right now, he must remain in the world among human beings and pursue the Tao and implement the Tao. I think is what he's saying here. But we'll discuss more of that in class. That's all for this assignment of the selections from the Lunyu that have to deal with Kongzi or Confucius as a teacher and as a person. That is all. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.